It's time to learn about one of the most feared warriors in history. In feudal Japan, there were many different types of warriors, but the most famous were the samurai. The word samurai means one who serves, and they were the military nobility of Japan, from the 12th to the 19th century. Samurai were the equivalent of knights in medieval Europe. They were mounted warriors who fought on horseback and on foot with swords, bows, and guns. They were employed by the Japanese nobility and were expected to be totally loyal to their master. Where did the samurai come from? Well, there were three main groups that made up the early samurai class. The first was the bushi, or military class. This group was made up of local lords and chieftains who had military power. Over time, they began to take on the role of the samurai, becoming professional warriors. The second group was the kumi, or farming class. These were the peasants who lived on the land owned by the bushi. When the bushi went to war, the kumi would leave their farms and fight alongside them. After the battles, they would return home and resume their farming. The third group was the shizoku, or artisan class. These were the blacksmiths, armorers and sword makers who supplied the weapons and armor the samurai needed for battle. As the samurai became more professionalized, these artisans became more important and began to be treated as equals. The samurai were not only fierce fighters, but they were also highly skilled in the arts of war. They were trained in strategy, tactics, and logistics. They also kept detailed records of their military campaigns, which helped to preserve the history of this period in Japan. Now, let's talk about what made the samurai so feared. First of all, they were incredibly disciplined. From the time they were young, they were taught to follow orders without question and to put the needs of their master above their own. They were also trained to be fearless in battle. This is probably why a lot of people find them so fascinating. But don't be fooled. Being a samurai wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Sure, they got to wear really cool armor and ride into battle on horseback, but they also had to follow a strict code of conduct. If a samurai broke the rules, he could be punished with the death penalty. Talk about pressure. One of the most important things to understand about the samurai is that they were not just mindless killing machines. They were actually highly cultured individuals. They were expected to be proficient in poetry, calligraphy, and painting, as well as the martial arts. In fact, the samurai were so cultured that they had their own aesthetic code, which emphasized simplicity, elegance, and restraint. This is reflected in their art, their architecture, and even their gardens. Another thing that made the samurai so unique was their sense of honor. They were expected to be courageous, loyal, and self-sacrificing. A samurai was expected to fight to the death rather than surrender. And if he was defeated in battle, he was expected to take his own life rather than live in shame. Now that may sound extreme, but remember that the samurai were living in a very different time and culture than we are today. Their sense of honor was actually one of their most admirable qualities. Now let's talk about some of the most famous samurai in history. One of the most legendary samurai was Miyamoto Musashi. He was a ronin, or masterless samurai, who became famous for his sword skills. Musashi was said to be able to defeat any opponent, no matter how skilled they were. Another famous samurai was Oda Nobunaga. He was a daimyo, or feudal lord, who was famous for his military genius. Nobunaga was responsible for conquering much of Japan and paving the way for the Edo period. The samurai may be gone, but their legacy lives on. Today, there are still many people who practice traditional samurai arts like kendo, judo, and aikido, and there are still many museums and shrines dedicated to the samurai throughout Japan. So if you ever have the chance to visit Japan, be sure to learn more about the fascinating history of the samurai. If you want to learn more about the samurai, check out the series in the description below. And now, it's time for your quiz. What was the name of the class of warriors in feudal Japan? What was the name of the legendary samurai who was said to be able to defeat any opponent? What is the name of the series that you can watch to learn more about the samurai? To answer the first question, the class of warriors in feudal Japan was called the samurai. To answer the second question, the name of the legendary samurai who was said to be able to defeat any opponent was Miyamoto Musashi. And to answer the third question, the name of the series that you can watch to learn more about the samurai is in the description below. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. If you want to learn more about world history, stay tuned for more videos. And remember, history is full of amazing people and events. All you have to do is ask the right questions. Bye.